Good morning, everyone. I'm here on my porch enjoying the sun, warming up from the cold. Wanted to come on and do the thought of the day. Today's topic I wanted to go ahead and share about is the ego. It's a very misunderstood concept. If you think about it, it became really popular to look at in the 80s into 90s, ego edging God out. Your ego is in the way, your ego is the problem. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is that the ego is part of our mind. It has a function. Spirit's viewpoint on ego is very different than what we've been taught to look at the ego and how to go ahead and deal with it. And that's what I wanted to go in and outline for you today, to really consider what that part of the mind is and its purpose. A lot of the stuff, coming back to the principle that Spirit teaches of everything you have now is exactly what you'll have when you liberate. The only difference is how you perceive it. And one of the things that I want to really bring to your attention is to ask the question, if it's there and we can't get rid of it, then it's part of our mind. We didn't create it. It's there for a purpose. Is it possible that our issue is that we don't understand its purpose? So therefore we use it in a way that is counterintuitive, counterproductive than what we're looking to go ahead and create. Is the issue actually understanding what its real purpose is so that we can work with it and perceive that truth and learn to actually use it for its actual purpose than what we've been using it for? And the ego is one of the greatest examples of that. When you look at the ego and you look at where it comes into play, let's just say I walk into a room with a bunch of other, psychics, people in a New Age community, and I start spouting all this stuff about how self-important I am. I start making a point to let everyone know, how many years experience I have of channeling. Not that that hasn't happened before. I'm human, I bleed. You know, Whatever that is that may be for you, where you can relate to that type of idea of it coming into play. You know, what was its call? Why did it appear? If it's part of our mind, then the attitude of treating it like an enemy is completely wrong. Think about it this way. When we have a ex that we're going ahead and breaking up with, and if you look at your history, a lot of times we deal with it very simply. Out with the old, take the trash out. You're done. It's emotional maturity where the two people talk about their differences and don't have to hate each other because of them. They can lovingly let each other go and still be free to be in each other's life in some form or some way afterwards. Still be able to be supportive and not forget all the loving moments that they had, the good times. So one of our complaints when we are treated this way, let's just say it's a job that tells us we're being fired. Oh, we've got lots of complaints. You know, we feel abandoned. We feel neglected. We feel that there's something wrong with us. We have trauma afterwards of feeling worthwhile for another job. I watched my husband go through this several times when, in the industry, it was just a movement to get rid of workers, find an excuse, thin the herd, because we need to save money. But it took him at least 6 months afterwards to feel worthy to go on an interview. Intellectually, he understood everything that happened. Emotionally, he certainly did not. And it took 6 months for him to undo that type of rejection. We go through that all the time. So my point in bringing that up is that if you're treating the ego the same way, the enemy, that which blocks, that which edges God out, and treat it with hostility, you're attacking yourself. That doesn't make any sense, because all you're doing is inviting in the twins. and they visit with us all the time. Trauma and drama. The twins that are always there. Trauma creates drama, invites drama in, and the two of them wreak havoc in our lives. And then we have to clean up the mess afterwards. So perhaps we need to relook at ego and take a look at what that actually is and what its purpose is. Not its true purpose, different lesson. What was it originally created for? What is its task and purpose in our manifestation process? But what we've actually done with it, what we do know of it now. And one of the things to bring your attention to the ego, and I'll go back to the example of walking in the room with, where I feel intimidated. And so I start talking about how self-important and my achievements among people to make sure they understand that I have a place in that room. Before any of that happened, when I walked in, I encountered fear. Fear is the calling card that summons the ego. It is not there to block God. It is there to protect us. We call it in. There is no occasion that ego does not come into play in our life. And really consider this for a moment. Look at it as a math equation. We feel insecure. We feel afraid. In comes ego. And what is it doing? Well, it's creating separation. It's creating self-importance. It's reminding us, that our accomplishments in a really, usually horrible way, that doesn't really work. But what it's doing is protecting us. And who called it is always us. It never arrives during the great periods. It arrives when we have fear. And ego answers. And ego in some form or some way, either actually every way. What ego does is that it takes whatever perceptions that we're having and creates an illusion to make them acceptable. And Spirit always says about the ego that we misunderstand it. Its intentions are pure. Its methods, however, highly questionable. Because the ego, the way that we use it, is actually built on living and working within this world. And in this world, the way that we deal with that is by taking power from each other. Our principle through the ego is not to learn to connect, be, and share power. Our principle, and you have to keep in mind before you turn spiritual, because those who say they're spiritually minded would probably be offended by that statement. Good. Be offended. You're about to learn something about yourself then. The point of it is that when we go deep and actually look at the math equation, the ego doesn't come into play until we encounter fear, and its purpose is to lie to us. It's one of the theories that I have with AIs of why when they have these super intelligent computers and they always keep coming up with the solution to knock us off as a final solution. Well, they don't have programmed egos to lie to themselves. So they see everything up front, all of our insanity, everything we say but we don't mean, everything we do without actually honoring the intentions of what it is that we're actually trying to do. And the ego comes in and makes it something else entirely to make it palatable, to make it acceptable. We do it every day by looking around and look at our politics and look at what's going on in this world, whatever side you fall on. There's so much of a disconnect on what are the facts, and we're all living in fiction. Because the fiction makes us feel better. It makes us not want to scream when we're going to the supermarket simply to get a loaf of bread. And that is the purpose of the ego. It comes when we call it. So let's break this down and put it in a more simple way. Let's look at the twins, trauma and drama. And we say, oh, well, there's this situation from when I was younger, and this is how I react, this is how I respond. And the ego is there involved with all that. We know that the pattern behaviors is unhealthy for us. We know that. We get to a point that we can see that, we can intellectually understand that. But when we get triggered, we can't stop the defense. One of the key factors with the ego is that it will constantly come online to protect us when we feel threatened, when we feel afraid, when we feel like we can't cope with what it is that we're actually seeing, what the truth is. We're not ready to deal with this, because in order to deal with this, we then have to go back into the trauma and drama and really go into what happened to us, which is not our standpoint of what we really do strongly. And I say that from speaking with many healers that work with people. And one of the feedback they constantly give is how long it takes, how many sessions, just to get the person to feel comfortable enough to open up, to feel safe, to really feel what they're feeling. And think about that. We spend all this money of so many sessions just to feel safe enough to trust ourselves to say what we're really feeling, to say what we're really thinking. Well, what do you think is in the way of all that? That's a mask. What do you think put that mask into play to protect us? That's the ego. So how do we move from a position of what is it that we really feel and getting through that mask? And most of us honestly don't. We cope. We learn coping mechanisms to deal with the twins, trauma and drama. We learn to be more gentle with ourselves when the reactions come up. When we say, oops, our mind's getting crazy, I'm getting obsessive, I'm once again in this pattern. And so we've learned to come up with coping mechanisms for it. But what we haven't done is saying, it's gone. The mask is gone. The trauma and the drama is completely removed. I am the being without that. That, if we have that happen once in life, is a magical life. So what are we missing? What's the secret here? Here's what I want you to consider for thought of the day. If spirit is right, and the purpose of the ego is to protect us, and that the ones who's actually calling it is us, we're afraid. I can't cope with what the situation is. And so up comes a mask, even a new one that we create, because the new situation, and it pulls from the data files that it knows, our trauma and drama, and creates a lie. So we don't really see our fear. We don't really see why we're intimidated. We don't really see why we're scared. Why don't we feel like we're enough yet again? No, we don't focus on that. Let's focus on how self-important we are, or how much it's actually your problem, not my problem. We project. Whatever it may be, or we take on the faults of others and beat ourselves for it. Because while it's painful, it's pain that we know. We're okay with pain that we know, as much as we say we're not. So we'll take on the pain and live that trauma and drama experience with the twins and have them over for a house guest for a while. And eventually it fades. Is it possible that what the issue is in undoing these patterns that's so difficult for us to get rid of is that we haven't taken responsibility? And the appropriate question is, responsibility for what? Responsibility for whatever it is we're avoiding. Keep in mind the dance. The ego will come into play to avoid the dance by lying to us, either through projection, inner projection, however that works. But what it's blocking us from is actually coming into alignment. And why? If its intention is so good, why would it do that? Because we haven't taken responsibility for the pattern and said to it, I no longer require this protection. I will face the trauma and drama. I will know the truth. I'm not interested in the protection anymore. I don't need the patterns of lies anymore. We haven't told it. We've grown up and strong enough and don't need it anymore. When we do, when we come to an actual decision and say, I will not, comma, whatever that is, and we mean it from bones to flesh, the ego always acquiesces. It gives up the game. Because we said we no longer require the protection. And so consider, thought for the day, whatever pattern it is that goes on in your life that you struggle with, that you can't quite figure out, that it always comes up again and again and again and again. Been to therapy, read books, been to classes, been to this, been to that, had my DNA resequenced, and still, there it is. The moment I get threatened, I'm back at it. Is it possible that the only place you needed to go was within and have a conversation with yourself? Because again, the ego is part of the self, not in a accusatory manner. Look at the damage you've done. When you look at what the ego has done to protect us, Spirit always says the ego takes the insanity of the world, makes it seem insane, lies to us, makes it seem sane, lies to us, so we can deal with the insanity of the world in a lie to make it sane, just so we can go buy a loaf of bread in the supermarket, so we could sleep at night, knowing it's all wrong. We know that. But because we have the lie, we can get by. It's enough. Is it enough? What would happen if we actually stood before it and said, no more? I take responsibility. Give me the wheel to my own vehicle. I choose my destiny. I require this protection no more. But I see what you did for me. I see how you protected me. And I see the value of what you've done. But this is a pattern that doesn't suit us. I got it from here. Would the ego acquiesce? Would it give up the trauma and drama mask so that we can move past it, deal with what it is that we're actually avoiding, and heal it? And the answer is yes, every single time. So thought for the day. Consider the ego. Consider what we understand about it. Consider what we've been taught. And then consider the little bit that I just shared on Spirit's point of view of how the ego works, its function in misperception, and what we've done with it, and how it keeps us safe in this world. How we deal with the insanity that happens in the world every day, and why we create the lies, and how it's all centered around avoiding the twins, trauma and drama. You can't get a vampire out of your house unless you know its name. Well, you can't get a demon out of the house unless you know its name. When you know its name, you have power over it. And as long as trauma and drama is left in the background and the ego is forward facing, protecting us, we can't know our inner demons' names. We can't call it out of the house. That which is disowned within the subconscious will wreak havoc. And the ego, the way we currently perceive it and use it, whether we realize it or not, is there to lie to us about it. It's there to protect us. It's there to create a false image, a false mask. And it's killing us. Emotionally, it's killing us. Is it time to rethink the way we view the ego? Thought for the day. You guys have a great day.